Hey friends, I'm Jess Connolly. I'm an author, a coach, a Bible teacher, and a local church leader, and I love talking to real people who know what it means to have full lives, but also want to walk in abundance. This podcast is for you. It's not my podcast, it's ours. It's for people who crave lighthearted conversations and deeply spiritual truth. It's for people who are busy, tired, waiting, growing, dreaming, working, or praying about what's next. Wherever you're listening from, if it's quiet, mundane, or busy, I am praying for you, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's go. So summer isn't actually over until September 22nd, but for most of us, the longer days of this season are winding to a close, and we're winding up for the fullness of fall. I'm not sure why we all feel so much pressure to make summer perfect, but every year around this time, I feel it too. I start worrying that I haven't seized these days for all they're worth. If you've had the summer of your life and you want to keep the vibes going, this episode is for you. If you feel like you want to redo and you want to rewind back to May and start all over again, this episode is also for you. Let's go. Gals, I'm not sure why, but the predominant feeling I think a lot of us wrestle with when it comes to summer at the beginning of summer is, I want to experience all that it is. I want to make the most of it. I want to basically make all my dreams come true. And then I'm not sure why, but at the end of the summer, I feel like what a lot of us feel is, was I even present for that? Did I enjoy it? Did I make the most of it? Did I actually soak it up for what it's worth? And I've been coaching women for years. We've been talking about this season for years. I'm not sure why it has such a chokehold on us as far as our expectations and how reality actually hits. But I will tell you that I feel all of those things as well. And so we are using this episode to just kind of say like, hey, so long summer. We want to enjoy what you brought. We want to count the fruit of that. And also we want to process it well if it didn't go the way we wanted it to. And we want to just go into fall with clear hearts and minds. Now, listen, I know it's not even technically over yet. This episode is going to first air on the 29th of July. So depending on where you live in the country, your kids might not go back to school for an entire month. You might have had nothing shift. It might be warm where you're at for months on end. Listen, here in Charleston, we basically get summer weather until October. We're usually sweating on Halloween. But there's something that starts to shift in the air where I think a lot of us are like, okay, normal rhythms are coming back. Normal routines are coming back. If you're in a church community, maybe those things are picking back up again. And so I think no matter our life stage or season, we can kind of feel this like, okay, it's winding down. How was it? Are we okay? What's going to happen when things begin to pick up again? So I'll tell you right at the top of this episode, we're going to kind of just focus on summer this episode. And then next week, we're going to talk a little bit about fall. I'm going to have my best friend and pastor and husband, Nick Connolly, on the episode. And we're going to talk a little bit about fall, essentially like going back to school as adults, whether you're going back to school literally or not. Like, how can we really prepare ourselves for this season ahead and what God has for us and all the things. But this episode, we're just going to focus on summer. So I think it's really helpful if you kind of are oriented and can even be honest and awake about the narrative of how your summer's been, where it's been. So I'll just start by going first and being honest about how mine has been. If you were listening to any of our episodes back in late spring, specifically, Nick came on the podcast with me for an episode called Let's Dream Again. And we kind of just shared a little bit about our life, where we were at. We were dealing with some deep grief, a lot of different pain happening in our life. And y'all, I just want to say, I don't know why, but I do feel like the most painful seasons of my life always happen in summer. And I've had a couple in the last 10 years, maybe the last 15 years of like the hardest seasons I've walked through. They've always hit in the middle of summer. I don't know why that is, but it's really interesting. It's a really interesting time to kind of like feel heartbroken or to feel heavy or to just be dealing with different kinds of brokenness. And so I will say, like, that's been the reality of our summer. I don't know if you're a Taylor Swift fan or not. I don't know if you absolutely hate her, but I will tell you that I was hanging out with my mom and my sisters in late spring, and we heard the song, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, for the first time. And we were like, wow, this might be the anthem of all of our summers. We're all dealing with loss and pain in different kind of ways. And yet we're going to keep showing up and keep loving people. We were actually all going on really like huge blessings of trips to different places. My sister went to Costa Rica. My mom went on a cruise with my other sister to Europe, and Nick and I were going on this trip to Portugal and Italy, and I've shared a little bit about both of those on social media, but we knew we're going to be going to these dream trips, taking these trips of a lifetime that felt like just such a huge blessing, but we're going to be doing it with broken hearts. And I will say that is how this summer has felt. I've never cried for so many days in a row. I've completely given up on mascara and eyelash extensions because it's not happening in my life anymore. The tears have broken the glue and broken the mascara. And also I've experienced like wild peace in the midst of grief. And I've experienced God's nearness and joy and blessing in the midst of grief. But it has been just like a really heartbreaking season. So that being said, I want to just give you the context for where I'm at, for what my life looks like. And I hope that in your own space, you're able to pause and say like, hey, what has been the story of this summer? Maybe holding some of the harder parts of it or some of the beautiful parts of it as well. That being said, if we're going to kind of soak up this season, if we're going to process it well and steward it well, I do always think the first question that we can ask is how and where can we count the fruit? What did God do in this season? How did he show up? How did he bless us? Where was the beauty? Where was the fruit? What was growing? And so I want to encourage you to ask that question about this past season, or even again, this present season. And this act of counting the fruit, of choosing gratitude, is honestly so much more than like gentle thankfulness. And it's so much more than maybe like a toxic positivity that says like, oh, it was great. Just be thankful. Everything's fine. Gratitude is not an antidote to fight or solve pain. I do think it makes us stronger, but I don't think that choosing gratitude eradicates any of the pain or any of the suffering that we're actually dealing with. I just think that noticing where God is moving, how he's shifting, how he's growing, even how he's growing us through the pain, absolutely makes us stronger for whatever weakness we're dealing with, we're coming against. So I will go first. I'm going to count the fruit for you of our summer so far. As I make this list, I will tell you, I don't know that I would have put any of these things necessarily. I wouldn't have put most of them on a bucket list for what I wanted this summer to look like. But here is me counting the fruit for the summer 2024 as it is so far. Speaking of pain, a narrative I've told, a way that I have bragged on God this summer, is we took our kids to Portugal, which was a dream that Nick and I always had. And when we went, we were in the middle, again, of just like a lot of heartache, a lot of pain, a lot of kind of like chaos happening around us, loss from losing my stepdad this past spring. Friends, I do not mind telling you, I did not go to escape my pain. I assumed my pain would come with me. I actually ended up crying most of the plane ride there, just thinking like, man, I can't believe we're going on this trip and I'm dealing with so much loss and heartache. And something happened within the first 24 hours where God literally, I believe, miraculously put a pin in my pain. It was like he put it up on a wall and put a cute little thumbtack in it and said like, it's going to sit there for the next 10 days. It didn't feel like escapism. It felt like relief. It felt like I could get my head above water. I slept better than I had. I had great time with the Lord. I was able to just laugh with my kids and Nick. Like we laughed so much. We started laughing when we landed in Portugal, and I don't think we stopped laughing for 10 days. And it was just a huge, huge, huge relief. I will tell you on the back end, as soon as my kids left Portugal, our kids left Portugal, and Nick and I went to Italy for a retreat, which again, I'm saying all this really casually as if it's not like a dream trip of a lifetime. It really, really was. But as soon as our kids left, I felt like the pin came out and I was like, oh, I have to deal with my pain again. So that was interesting, and both were good. I was so grateful for the 10 days of reprieve that God did that miraculously, even though I didn't think that would happen. I don't know if people were praying for me for that to happen, But it was also good to then take the pain off the wall and begin to deal with it again. But so I would say, God put a pin in my pain. We laughed so much with our kids. There were certain parts of that trip like that I will never forget. I need to go ahead and already go back and look at pictures and videos. But like the last night we were in Portugal, we took our kids scootering on like little Lime scooters around Portugal. And I am actually like a very safety conscious mom. And scootering is not something I would really ever want to do myself necessarily, unless I was feeling super free, because I'd be worried about head injuries or broken bones in a foreign country. But we all scooted for like 90 minutes and had the time of our life. And I don't think I'll ever forget it. And it was just dreamy. It was just silly little fun, but a huge miracle. Another thing I'm personally counting the fruit of this summer is I absolutely fell in love with seminary. So I've shared on some past episodes, I didn't go back to seminary. I've never been before, but I went back to school starting seminary last fall. I feel like last fall was a huge adjustment period, kind of fitting grad school into my life and figuring out how that was going to work. The spring semester, I'm going to give it to you guys straight. Our life was going through so much upheaval. I was launching a book. We lost my stepdad. Nick was launching a book. My family, other people in my family were launching a book. We were just dealing with so much craziness. I don't even really remember going to school. I don't know how I got through that semester. God showed up. I know I took a bunch of tests and wrote a bunch of papers. I really don't remember it. And I don't know that I remember a lot from those classes. But this summer, I kept joking that I think I've trauma bonded with my textbook. I have loved this class that I'm in. I'm in a class that I'll finish up in early August on the epistles and Revelation. And I just fallen in love with school. I've fallen in love with being in school. I literally am obsessed with my textbook. It's now my new favorite book to read besides the Bible. But I'm just super grateful for that. It took a whole year, but I really felt like I found my groove as a student in a master's program. So I'm really grateful for that. Another little thing that I'm going to count the fruit of, a rhythm that God gave me, is sending a text to everybody in our immediate family every morning. I don't do it every single morning, but I have been doing it most mornings. Like, for example, right now, my daughter is at camp for 3 weeks, but Nick and I have taken different trips, or our other kids have been at different things. And so we haven't all been together. Every morning, I've just felt kind of led by God to pray for one specific thing for our kids. And I've just sent them a text every morning saying, hey, I love you guys. This is what I'm praying for you. Maybe even sometimes I've said, like, here's how you can be praying for me. And in a season where these older kids that we have are moving and doing other things and living their own lives, it's been really sweet to just have that connection moment with them. And it's such a silly, small thing that I didn't see as being a piece of fruit this summer, but it's been really, really, really life-giving. I maybe did see this coming. Maybe this would have been on my summer bucket list, but I'm counting the fruit for slower mornings in Jesus' name. I remember when my kids were younger, and some of you guys might be here, and when they would get out for school for the summer, my immediate thought would be like, okay, how are we going to get through the day? Like, what are we going to do? How am I going to like entertain them all day? You know, what rhythms are we going to have? And summer would feel stressful in that way. And now I have to say there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I want to tell you guys with older kids that that is not necessarily as much of the conversation anymore. I still have to kind of like think through and make plans for our 11-year-old. But our teens are kind of doing their own thing. They're taking care of themselves. And the huge benefit to summer is that there is no carpool in the morning. There is no way early wake up and drop off. And I've been wildly grateful. Actually, a few times, and when I say a few, I'm going to say over 5, not as many as 10. So somewhere between 5 and 10, I have made a plan to go to a workout class earlier in the morning. And every single time I have canceled it the night before because I've thought, nope, I don't want to do that. I actually want to take my slower morning. I will gladly work out in the afternoon so I can just have some coffee, relax, have time with the Lord, read my textbook, because I'm obsessed with it. All right, moving on. Other pieces of counting the fruit. I cut my hair this summer. I don't even know how many inches off my hair, probably close to a foot. I did donate it and was so excited to get to do that too. I know people always like to kind of have that follow-up question, but I had been planning to cut my hair this summer, but I had been like waffling back and forth, feeling like I might chicken out. And then when I decided to do it, I did it in like a 10-minute span of time, just like, okay, let's do it. Let's cut it. Ladies, I don't need to explain to you why cutting your hair can change your life and, how freeing and beautiful it feels. You know that. But it has met and exceeded all my expectations. And I have had it cut for maybe like 3 weeks. And almost every single day of those 3 weeks, I thought, man, I'm glad I cut my hair. I'm so glad I did that. I loved having long hair and I love having shorter hair. And I'm really grateful. The last little piece of fruit that I just want to count, because I'm not saying this in any way to boast, and I hope you guys would know that about me, but because I think when it's good, you got to call it good. Nick and I are in a season of just like wild health in our marriage, and every single minute I get to spend with him, I'm so grateful. I don't think it really hit me until we got home from our Portugal and Italy trip that I realized, like, I have been with this man for 21 days straight. We have not had like more than an hour away from each other while we've been awake for 21 days. We've been traveling. We've had our kids with us. We've been out of the country. We've had stressful travel plans. And I don't think that we had like bickered one time. Not bickered, not fought, not really even had like any like heavy, hard discussions, even in the midst of just a really heavy and hard season. And I'm just super grateful. And we actually are about to celebrate our 19-year marriage anniversary, our 19-year wedding anniversary. And I just grateful for like, okay, 19 years in, we can go through really hard seasons together and like actually truly be on each other's team. And we can spend 21 days together of like not a minute apart and still want to spend more time together. And I'm very, very, very grateful for that. And that's a huge piece of fruit that I'm counting from this summer. So I want to know, what fruit are you counting for this summer? I would be so blessed if you would post on social media and tag me or DM me or do something, because I want to hear, like, what did God do? How did you see him move? How did he show up for you in this season? Okay, we've counted the fruit, but we also know that we're like feeling like it's just running through our fingers. It's just like slipping through our hands this season. So here's my next question for you. If the season of summer does not technically end until September 22nd, even if your kids are getting ready to go back to school, even if you're jumping back into rhythms, even if maybe you didn't have the best season that you wanted to have, the second question that I want to ask of me and of you is, if you don't count it as over, what else can still happen? What else can still happen? What would make you feel like, oh my gosh, I did this one thing, I did this bucket list item, I jumped into this new hobby, or I tried this one thing, or I had this one girls' night? What is something you could still make happen in the days between now and, we're going to call it September 22nd, to actually say like, wow, I seized that thing that I wanted to make happen this summer? I have two main ones, I think. And one, I'm going to tell you guys, this is just straight up embarrassing. I live at the beach, okay? I live at the beach. I live 15 minutes from my door to the beach. I have not been to the beach since we did baptisms on Good Friday back in April. I haven't done a beach day with friends. I haven't taken my kids to the beach. I haven't done a date night on the beach. I haven't gone on a long walk on the beach. I haven't even seen that thing. I don't even know if she still exists. I'm sure she does. But my big thing is, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to get kicked out of Charleston. I need to go to the beach. So as of today, when I'm recording this episode, I'm going to a church hangout tonight on the beach. And then I am going to try very hard to go do a beach day with my kids and Nick on Friday, and actually like maybe lay out. I don't know though, y'all, because listen, the shark attacks this summer, what is happening? Like, I already don't play in the shark's house. Like, the shark attacks this summer are crazy. So I'm like, I really want to go float or something, but I don't know. I got to think about that part. I don't know. Anyways, so my number one thing is I need to go to the beach. TBD on whether or not I'll get in the water. The second thing that I really, really wanted to do this summer that I am going to make happen, I've got it on the calendar, I've already signed up for it, is that I really want to go to an intro pottery class. I have this feeling deep in my soul that pottery might be for me. I want to make more space for creativity and for hobby in my life. And I'm not exactly like a tidy perfection girl. And so that's why I think maybe like throwing pottery on a wheel might be for me, like a little more crafty, but a little more, artistic. I'll keep you updated, but I am going to go to that pottery class. I'm so excited. I found a deal on Groupon for an intro class, and I go next week, and I can't wait. So my question for you is, if you don't count this season as already over, already past, what else can you still make happen? All right. If we're trying to wrap up the summer well, if we're trying to send this thing off with joy and gratitude, here's one thing I want to just kind of give you like a quick little heads up. Again, we'll talk about this more in next week's episode. But I went on social media and I said, okay, for those of you who are trying to wrap up summer well, you want to say goodbye to summer, what are some of your pain points? What are some things you want to talk about? And almost all of you said that you were just feeling a little fear or feeling a little anxiety about the fall. So again, we're going to get into that next week, but I just want to hand this to you as a gift and maybe as someone who might be a couple weeks ahead of you, because in some ways I feel like my summer ended this week. My kids aren't back in school yet, but a lot of my rhythms went back to normal. And I had to massively remind myself yesterday, re-entry shock and re-entry disappointment is very normal. So if you are ending summer and you're feeling grief or you're feeling maybe even like fear or frustration about like, man, I have to go back into all the normal things, they're all going to just pick back up. I don't want you to feel like you have to immediately reevaluate your life and wonder what's wrong with you because you feel those things. And when you maybe go back into some of those rhythms and you end the day and you're like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm exhausted, I don't want you to feel like, again, there's something inherently wrong with your patterns. The truth of the matter is, like, especially for those of us whose rhythms change a good bit, it just is more fun to be on vacation. It just is. Like, it does feel really nice. Unfortunately, I'm not even going to say unfortunately, because I don't believe it's an unfortunately. I think fortunately, God has given us vocation and he's given us gifts and he gives us usefulness in the world. But I think a lot of us enjoy summer because we don't have to be as useful, and that's okay too. Like, it's okay to just enjoy the world and not be useful. It's okay to enjoy a much slower pace. It's okay to say I like a day off sometimes more than I like a day working. For a long period of my life, if I had to describe my ideal day, it was a work day. And I don't think I'm there anymore. I love work. I love what I get to do for work. I feel so fulfilled by it. I feel so grateful that it's my job. Would I still rather like be laughing with my kids or, on a long walk with a friend sometimes I for sure would. And so I just want to tell you to expect re-entry shock, expect some disappointment. It doesn't mean you're in the wrong spot. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. And you don't have to stuff those feelings either. You can process them with God. And for a lot of us, if we're feeling grief, it may mean because we did the summer well. It may mean because we seized it for what it was. And for those of us who would say like, I'm feeling disappointment or I'm feeling grief because I didn't really get to rest, because I didn't really get time away, I do want to tell you to tune in next week, because the very good news is that rest is not only inherent to summer. And rest and rhythms of rest and renewal and joy and even recreation of our souls, those things can also live in the fall. And we can take what we experienced in the summer and transfer it to the days ahead as well. That being said, I think a lot of what we love about summer for many of us is the pace. Even if your job stays the exact same, for most of us, the pace of summer just kind of seems to slow down a little bit. And so again, Nick and I are going to share a little bit more about this next week on the podcast. But if you don't know, we have a coaching program called Life School, where Nick and I do some co-ed coaching for men and for women who are essentially just trying to step into all of the abundance in their life that God has for them. We work through things like taking inventory of our lives and figuring out the vision of our lives, identifying our priorities. And for the months of July and August, what we're actually coaching everyone in Life School through is their pace. So I actually wanted to give you just a tiny preview of some of the questions we are asking the people in Life School about pace. And if this sounds like coaching or teaching that you need, I cannot encourage you enough to sign up for Life School. You can sign up in the show notes. We'll put a link in the show notes to join Life School. It's a monthly membership, and we meet online every single month, but also give resources throughout the month. So I really just have 5 questions for you to kind of start to think about your pace. And again, we unpack this and more in Life School. So here are just 5 questions I want you to consider if you're realizing, ooh, what I really love about summer is the pace, and I want to figure out how to move that into fall. The first question is, when you're identifying things you want to put on your plate, the first question is it a heck yes? Is it a heck yes? Is this a absolutely yes, I have to do this with my time? The second question would be, if it's not a heck yes, is it a heck no? And so a lot of us are dealing with over-paced life or rushed life because we have things on our plate that maybe are not a heck yes, but we feel like we have to say yes to them out of obligation, or maybe even out of a little bit of indecision or indifference to our lives. And so we've just put things on our plate that we don't feel called to, that God necessarily hasn't given to us, but we feel like we have to because we're obligated. So if it's not a heck yes, it might be a heck no. So the first question is it a heck yes? The second question is it maybe a heck no that you need to get off your plate to help your pace be a little bit slower? The third question is it, meaning some rhythm or some role you have in your life, is it actually for later? Is it a heck yes, but not for now? So it needs to be a heck no. So it actually needs to be something that comes into your life a little bit later. And that will also a lot of times free up our pace. The last two questions that really, I believe, help me keep a pace that is sustainable. And I will say these are two questions that when I neglect them, I start to feel really overwhelmed in my schedule. Is number one, who in your life always gets a yes from you? If they're like, hey, I need you to come over and watch my kids. Can we go to coffee? Can you join me for dinner? These are the people that no matter what, you will always say yes for them. For example, of course, for me, my kids are always going to be a yes for me. I would say the women on my team are always going to be a yes for me. I have a few women that I walk with in a discipleship style relationship, and they're always going to get a yes for me. Even if I can't do something for them right then, I'm going to figure out how and when I can do it. But once you realize who always gets your yes, you will realize that there are probably potentially a lot of other people that need to be getting a no from you. And so my last question, as you're identifying your pace, is what are your standard ways to say no? Because we all need them. We are all coming against a lot of questions and a lot of asks on our time, and really just on our time. And we need an adequate and life-giving and generous way that we can say no in a pretty standardized way. Because I think for most of us, once we identify the people who always get our yes, we'll realize that we're actually usually saying yes to people outside of that circle. And that doesn't mean I don't want to be generous with people outside of that circle. It doesn't mean I don't want to be loving and kind, but I also have to run a sustainable pace. So I do have to have kind of some boundaries and some concentric circles to how I spend time with people. Just as a really quick, connection to God's word. If you're like, wait, is this godly? We see Jesus do this in the New Testament. We see him have concentric circles of there were even certain groups of disciples that we see him pulling off with more often to have a more intimate relationship with. And it doesn't mean he loved the other disciples less. It doesn't mean he loved the thousands of people who are following him and hearing his teaching any less. It really is more like we just see this beautiful scale of discipleship, and that there are some people who are always going to get a yes from you. And there are some people that you maybe aren't going to always be able to give that same yes to. And of course, we see him sometimes pulling away not only from the whole group of disciples, but also from the thousands of people or hundreds of people who are waiting to be healed or waiting to be taught by him, and doing that so that he could spend time with the Father, spend time alone, be recreated, and be renewed. So again, we'll get into all things fall next week, but I wanted to give you a few questions to go ahead and be identifying what about this pace could you actually carry with you into the fall. Here's my last encouragement and commissioning for you. We started this episode by just kind of identifying, listen, at the start of summer, we're not going to seize it. At the end of summer, we're worried we haven't done enough or we haven't captured it. I just want to encourage you with this. That is how the enemy sounds in our life. He does come to our days, our weeks, our seasons, our giftings, our life, and say, was this enough? Did you do it right? Did you seize it, or did you waste it? And that isn't how our Father sounds. He has been moving in your life. He has been bringing fruit to the surface. Even if it hasn't necessarily been fun or enjoyable, he has been in your midst. He will go before you into the next season. He will go behind you to even wrap up and seal in what he did in this season. If you can, I want to commission you to speak life over your own season, even if it hasn't gone how you wanted it to go. We have so much authority. We have so much, I think, even just commissioning from God to speak life over our own lives, over our own seasons, and even over the ones to come. So I love you. I bless you. As we wrap up summer, I pray that you feel the boldness and the clarity to be able to do that for your own life, because God is mighty in you and he is in your midst. Let's go. Friends, I'm so grateful you listened to today's episode. Thanks for spending time with me. It would mean the world to me to connect with you. So you can send me a DM on Instagram at Jess A. Connolly, or head to my website, jessconnolly.com, for more ways to connect. If you have a minute to subscribe and leave a review of the podcast wherever you listen, it would massively help us reach more people with the good news that they can live fully awake. Let's go.